They built their whole strategy around you collapsing. And you didn't. That single fact, your refusal to become what their plan required, is what brought their world down. You were not the weapon. You were the variable they miscalculated. And there is no recovering from a miscalculation built into the foundation. If something in your chest just shifted reading that, type the word done in the comments. Because done is exactly what their chapter in your life is. Sealed. Filed. Closed. You remember the moment the ground moved. The conversation, the discovery, the realization arriving in your body before your mind had words for it, that the thing you had poured years into was being used against you. That the trust you extended had been studied and exploited with a precision that made the betrayal feel almost architectural. Like someone had spent real time learning the load-bearing points of your life specifically to hit them. What they did was targeted. The silence that followed, the kind where accountability never arrived, where the universe seemed to be looking in another direction entirely, that silence had weight. It was its own injury layered on top of the original one. But here's what was actually happening inside that quiet. In Scripture, the most consequential movements often occur in the middle of the night when nothing visible is stirring. The angel passes over. The dream arrives. The decree gets reversed. What looks from the outside like absence is frequently the precise condition under which heaven does its most irrevocable work. The silence after what they did to you was that kind of night. Something was moving. Something that had nothing to do with your effort and everything to do with a law that operates above human scheming. You were not forgotten in that silence. You were being covered by it. Haman had everything. Position, access, the ear of the most powerful king in the empire. And he spent it, all of it, engineering the destruction of one man who simply refused to bow. He commissioned the gallows himself. 75 feet. He wanted the whole city to see the fall. The night before the execution, the king could not sleep. Just insomnia. Just a restless man reaching for a book of royal records to pass the time. And in those pages, a forgotten act of loyalty by the man Haman had sentenced to die. By morning the sentence had reversed, the gallows had a different occupant, and the empire that Haman thought he controlled had moved on without him. He never touched that outcome. His destruction was assembled entirely from the materials of his own ambition. The gallows, the pride, the sleepless king, the open book, none of it required your intervention. That is how this law works. It does not need you to manage the collapse. It only needs you to still be standing when the records are read. Press the like button right now as an act of agreement with what is shifting in your favor. Here is the thing about their misread of you that turned out to be fatal. They looked at your patience and saw stagnation. They interpreted your restraint as an inability to move, your silence as the absence of options, your grace under pressure as evidence that the pressure was not registering. Every quality that was actually a mark of your formation, they filed under weakness. So they stopped watching you. David walked onto that field carrying a shepherd's bag, and Goliath laughed. Because from where Goliath stood, the geometry of the encounter was obvious: size, armor, experience, all on one side. What the giant's eyes could not measure was the decade of solitary formation behind that sling arm. The bear in the field. The lion. The years alone with God and the sheep and the stone and the sky, building accuracy and faith in the same motion. Goliath cataloged everything visible and missed everything that mattered. He made his assessment and dropped his guard in the same moment. The people who came against you did the same thing. They sized up the surface and concluded the outcome. The error cost them everything. Something worth understanding about the architecture of what they built against you: it required your participation to stand. The entire structure depended on you accepting their narrative about who you were. Your smallness was load-bearing for them. The moment you simply stopped cooperating with it, started moving at the pace of your actual assignment, started occupying the space your life was designed for, the whole thing lost its foundation. Nebuchadnezzar built a 90-foot golden statue and commanded an empire to bow on musical cue. The spectacle was enormous. The enforcement was real. And 3 people simply stood upright, and the entire performance revealed itself as what it always was: theater. The power that required that much orchestration to maintain was never power. It was insecurity wearing a crown. The people who operate from authentic authority rarely announce it. They move. They decide. Things get done around them without fanfare.
The ones who needed you diminished and needed witnesses to confirm your diminishment. That need was the tell. Genuine strength does not require an audience for its demonstrations. Drop 888 in the comments right now if you recognize what I am describing. Ending their world did not feel like a victory. Let me be honest about that, because the sanitized version does a disservice to everyone who lived through the real thing. It felt like grief. Like standing in the rubble of something you had genuinely loved and built and believed in, with debris in your hands and no clear instruction on whether to rebuild or walk away. You grieved what you thought it was. You grieved the version of the future you had constructed around it. You grieved the trust itself, the quality in you that allowed you to give fully, which now felt dangerous rather than generous. Somewhere inside that grieving you made a decision that changed the entire trajectory. It was not cinematic. It probably happened on an ordinary morning, a Tuesday or a Thursday. Nothing particularly significant about the sky outside. You got up. You moved toward the next thing. You chose forward motion as a quiet act of defiance against the ending they had written for you. That choice is the hinge. Everything that is building in your life right now pivots on that one ordinary morning when you decided the story was not over. Job sat in the ash for a long time. His friends explained his suffering at him with great theological confidence and got it entirely wrong. His wife told him to curse God and die. And Job, in his raw and unfiltered devastation, held on, not neatly, not theologically, but with the grip of someone who refused to let go even when the thing he was holding felt like silence. And when the restoration came, it did not trickle in. It arrived in a measure that made the loss look not insignificant. The loss was real, but proportionate to what the faithfulness through it had earned. There is a particular kind of person who comes out of the type of fire you walked through, and I want to describe them because I think you may not yet fully recognize yourself in the picture. Their confidence reads as calm to people who do not know what they have been through. They walk into rooms without needing to establish themselves because something in their bearing already did it quietly before they open their mouth. They are not trying to prove anything. The absence of that need is the most striking thing about them to anyone paying attention. They have developed a fluency in subtext that cannot be taught in any classroom. When someone approaches with an offer, they hear the offer and they also hear the architecture underneath it, the motive, the need, the calculation. They are not cynical. Cynicism is a wound that never healed. This is something else, discernment that was sharpened by the experience of being read wrong by people who should have known better, and who then learned to read others with a precision that protects without closing. They know how to receive. That one came late and cost something to learn. After years of pouring out into environments that took without reciprocating, learning to open hands when something genuine is offered required dismantling a survival instinct that had become habitual. But they learned it. And now they can tell the difference between something genuinely given and something dangled, and they respond accordingly. They have also learned to carry the story lightly, as a tool, not a trophy. They do not lead with what they survived, because the point is not the survival. The point is the person the survival produced. And that person speaks for itself. Some people walk out of the kind of fire you walked through and seal permanently. They stay functional. They keep performing life. But something behind the eyes goes quiet in a way that was not there before, and the quiet is not peace, it is protection. A door welded shut from the inside. You know the look because you were afraid, for a season, that you were headed there yourself. You did not go there. The fact that this word is reaching something alive in you is the evidence. You came through the fire unbound, which is the precise language from the book of Daniel, where Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walked out of a furnace that killed the soldiers at its threshold, with no smell of smoke on them, the only thing the fire consumed being the ropes around their wrists. The ropes are gone. What is walking out is free. Subscribe and stay connected here, because this channel exists specifically for the person I just described. And that person is you. Let me tell you what it actually looked like on their end when the world ended. It was not dramatic. There was no moment of public reckoning where everyone in the room simultaneously understood what had happened. It was a Wednesday. It was a result they expected to produce that they could not produce, because the capacity that generated those results walked out the door with you. It was a conversation where your name came up in a room where you were no longer present, and someone said something about what you were building now, and the people who had bet against you had to process that information privately, in the way that the most painful truths always get processed, alone, without witnesses. They carry that knowledge quietly. It does not announce itself, but it changes how they move through every room from that point forward, a slight adjustment in the posture of someone who now knows they miscalculated something significant, who cannot admit it publicly, and so presses it down where it becomes part of the permanent weight they walk with. You handed them that weight by simply becoming what you were always becoming. It required no campaign from you, no strategy. You were not the agent of their collapse. You were the proof that the collapse was inevitable. Tell me where you are watching from right now. Drop your city or country in the comments, because this word is moving across time zones and landing where it needs to land. There is a version of you that existed before all of this happened. I want to speak about that person with some care, because the tendency is to look back at them with either nostalgia or embarrassment, and both miss what is actually true about who they were. They were not naive. They were operating from a set of beliefs about people that, at the time, the evidence in front of them supported. They extended trust because trust had, up to that point, been a reasonable investment. They believed in the structures they were building inside because those structures had given them no reason yet to doubt them. They were generous because
Okay.
generosity had been reciprocated enough times to feel like a
Alright.
reliable language.
I'm putting cases
There was
on
nothing
all
wrong with the
you
person they were. They were simply working with incomplete information about the specific people they were dealing with. What happened to them, to that version of you, is that the information arrived in the worst possible way. Suddenly. At cost. In a context where the arrival of the information and the destruction it caused were simultaneous. There was no buffer. No gradual revelation that allowed for a measured response. Just the ground moving in the thing you had built on it tilting in the realization arriving in a single devastating sequence. That person deserved better. And I want to say that plainly, without the theological spin that sometimes gets applied to these moments to make them tidier than they were. They deserved better. The betrayal was not a curriculum they signed up for. It was an injustice done to someone who was operating in good faith. An injustice does not become acceptable because of what it produces in the person it happens to. What I am saying now is for the part of you that still carries that person. The part that sometimes replays the moments before the ground moved and wonders if there were signs you should have read sooner, questions you should have asked, exits you should have taken. Put that interrogation down. The version of you that existed then was not deficient. The people who deceived you were skilled at deception. That is a statement about them, not a reflection on your perception. What is also true is that the person who walked out the other side of that experience is carrying things the earlier version could not have accessed without it. Not better at being human, that framing is too clean.
You
More
think
accurate.
you can do this shit?
More weight to the
Yay!
difference between what is being performed and what is actually present.
You think you can do this
More able
to
to sit with
me?
ambiguity without needing to resolve it prematurely into false
You
comfort.
motherfuckers
More
be
equipped to build the
playing
specific things that are now being asked of you, because you understand at a depth that only
When I
experience
get
creates what it
finished.
costs to build something real and what it feels like when the thing being built is not real at all. The person you are now is not a more defended version of who you were. Defense would have been the easier and more understandable outcome. What you became is something harder to achieve, someone who moved through betrayal without letting betrayal write the terms of every future encounter. Someone who kept the door open at a width appropriate to wisdom rather than sealing it shut in the name of protection. Someone who is, against reasonable expectation, still genuinely present to life. That is the miracle here. Not that you survived. That you are still here. The version of your life that is now opening was not accessible before all of this. That sounds like a rationalization for what happened. It is not. What they did to you is unnecessary and unjust, and no amount of outcome justifies it. But the person who is standing at this new threshold is structurally different from the person who would have arrived here on the original timeline, and that difference is going to matter for everything that is built from this point forward. Joseph at 30 years old walked into Pharaoh's throne room having spent 13 years in conditions designed to humiliate and erase him. The pit. The foreign household. The prison. A sequence that, mapped on paper, looks like a story heading toward nothing. But in that throne room, when the most powerful man in the world needed someone to interpret the uninterpretable, there was only one person in the empire who had been built for that exact conversation. The 13 years were not a delay in Joseph's story. They were the story. The preparation was the main event, and Pharaoh's question was the final exam. Your assignment is waiting with the same kind of precision. What you have learned, what has been excavated in you through the years of difficulty, the specific form of authority that suffering without bitterness produces. It is exactly matched to something that is now looking for a person who has been through exactly what you have been through. That is not coincidence. The word for that is appointment. Your voice has changed. You may not have noticed it yourself, but the people around you have. There is a quality to what you say now that was not there before, not louder, not more polished, but more grounded. When you speak from the place that the last few years excavated in you, something lands differently than it did when you were speaking from the place of accumulated information and good intentions. What lands differently now is weight. The weight of someone who has carried a thing, not just studied it. In the book of Acts, the council looked at Peter and John, uneducated fishermen, by the estimation of the religious establishment, and recognized that these men had been with Jesus. Not with his curriculum. With him. Through the moments that changed everything. Through the nights that no official record captured. The time in the courtyard. The fishing boat. The conversation after the resurrection on the beach at dawn. That proximity to the real thing produced something in them that all the formal training in the world could not replicate, and the people questioning them could sense it even as they were trying to dismiss it. What you have been proximate to, in your particular fire, is the real thing. Not a simulation. Not a case study. The actual weight of injustice and the actual work of surviving it with your soul intact. And when you speak from that place, not about it, but from it, people will sense what the council sensed. Something that was not manufactured. Something that cannot be credentialed. Something that sits in the register of what is true. The rooms that are opening to you in this season are opening partly because of that quality. The conversations that are coming your direction are coming because someone, somewhere, sense that what they are dealing with requires a person who has been through the kind of thing you have been through. They may not frame it that way. They may not even fully understand why they reached out to you or why your name came up in the conversation. But the current that is moving you toward the right rooms is moving with the precision of something that knows exactly what it is doing. Will not always look like what you used to call favor. The Magi did not follow a trumpet blast or a royal herald. They followed a star, something subtle, something that required a specific kind of attentiveness to even notice, let alone pursue across desert terrain for months. Most people in that era saw the same sky and went to bed. The Magi saw a signal. The difference was not the sky. It was the eyes. Your eyes are different now. Before everything fell apart, you might have needed favor to arrive in forms you recognized, a title, an announcement, a public acknowledgement from the right people. You have been trained out of that requirement. Now you can sense the weight of a genuine opening before it has fully materialized. You can read a room and know which conversation is going to matter before anyone else in it does. You can feel the difference between something that is aligned with where you are going and something that is merely appealing to where you have been. That attentiveness is the gift hidden inside the wreckage of what they did. They meant to cost you everything. They accidentally gave you the one thing that makes everything that is coming sustainable. The ability to steward it without being blinded by it. You have been waiting for internal permission to fully arrive. Some version of your own voice has been standing at the door of the new season saying, not quite yet. What if you are wrong? What if this is the moment you finally get it wrong again? That voice is not wisdom. It is the last living residue of what they installed in you. The doubt they cultivated by repeatedly treating your judgment as insufficient, your instincts as unreliable, your read of a situation as something that required their correction to be valid. Their authority over your self-assessment is revoked. Ruth walked into Boaz's field with no credentials that the culture recognized. A foreign widow gleaning at the margins. In every visible category, she was on the wrong side of the ledger. What she had was character so consistent it created its own gravity. Boaz noticed her before she spoke to him. The workers talked about her. Her reputation arrived ahead of her resume because integrity, sustained under pressure, becomes visible in ways that no networking strategy can replicate. She was not trying to be seen. She was just being exactly who she was, in the only field available to her. And by the end of the harvest, she was at the owner's table. The table has your name on it. The harvest is not metaphorical. Walk in without apologizing for the road you traveled to get here. Come an amen if this word is landing in the right place. Let that be your declaration, not for the comment section, but for yourself. An acknowledgement that you received this fully, without the asterisk of doubt. What they built to contain you is rubble. The ceiling they placed over your life, not dramatically, not with obvious malice, but through the steady accumulation of small diminishments, through consistently framing your instincts as suspect and your ambitions as grandiose. That ceiling cracked the day you stopped looking up at it and started moving through it. You did not demolish it. You outgrew it. There is a difference. Demolition is an act of war. Outgrowing is simply a consequence of becoming. The box did not shatter because you attacked it. It shattered because you kept growing in the dark, and the growth eventually demanded more room than their structure had allocated for you, and the structure gave way under a pressure it was never designed to hold. They are standing in what is left of their own blueprint. And you are standing somewhere they no longer have a map for. The horizon in front of you has no ceiling drawn on it. The air out here does not carry an agenda that belongs to someone else. You are moving at the speed of your own assignment for the first time in years, and if it feels unfamiliar, that is only because it has been a long time since you had this much room to run. This is not the beginning of your story. The beginning was the day you survived what was designed to end you. Everything from this point is the continuation of a plot that their interference could delay but could never derail. The story was always going to arrive here. They were always going to end up on the other side of what they tried to do to you. The only question was the timeline, and the timeline is closed now. You ended their world. Yours is just opening, and it has no ceiling on it at all. Go into it, all the way in. What is yours has been waiting with a patience that mirrors your own. Everything you are now capable of building, the quality of what you are now capable of building, required the person you became inside the fire. The season ahead is not a reward for suffering through the last one. It is the natural consequence of what the last one produced. Two entirely different things. Rewards can be revoked. Consequences of genuine formation cannot. What you carry now, the discernment, the authority that lives below the surface of your words, the capacity to tell the real from the performed at 20 paces, that goes with you into every room, every relationship, every decision from this point forward. It is structural. It is yours. And nothing that comes at you in the next season is going to find you the same person that the last season found. They ended their world the day they chose you as a target. You end this message exactly where you are always going to end up, standing, clear-eyed, and ready. It is done.